setup, initial setup, step 13, optional setup. Now here under the optional setup, we have several areas. And as it said, they're optional. This is in addition. This is where you do a lot of customizing of the software. This is where you make the software more friendly for your agency because you start adding in things that are not global for all programs, but are just specific for your agency. So we'll start with that first one. Agency specific customizable fields. I'll click there. This is where Child Plus is allowing you to add fields to the 4 areas you see here. The first is the Family Member tab. So we allow you to add fields to this Family Member screen in Child Plus. Now, if you'll look below, you have a choice of what type of field to add. You have data type text, where the answer can be 15 or 64 characters. You have a data type field that can be numeric. It could be a date field. It could be a drop down. Now, with the drop down data types, if you add a field that's a drop down, you're going to have to go into customized drop down choices and actually add what the choices will be in that drop down field. You have checkbox options. You can make fields that are yes, no. You can have notes fields where there's unlimited typing, as well as you can have section labels. Now, with the section label type fields, these are just headers where you're actually grouping your fields together. So I'll start there. I'm going to click on the arrow next to the data type section label, and I'm going to call the label URSIA Manager, because I have some fields where my URSIA Manager have questions that she wants us to ask of the families that's not already that questions are not already in Child Plus. So I can put URSIA Manager there. The row number and the item number. Where in the module do I want it? How do I want it to appear on the screen? What row? Is it the first row, the second row, third, or so on? And what item number? That's simply like the column or the order that it should be in that particular row. So because this is the first thing that I'm having here, I'm going to put a number 1 and a number 1. I want it to show up the first row and the first item. Child applicant. Do I want this section label of URSIA Manager to not show on the screen? Do I want it to show on the screen only, or do I want it to show on the screen and the printed app? Well, I'm going to have it show on the screen as well as the printed app for the child applicants. Now, for the siblings or the child non-applicant, I'm not going to use this field at all. When it comes to an adult applicant, this is like my pregnant moms in early Head Start. I do want it to show on the screen as well as the printed app. And for the adult non-applicants, I don't want to use it at all. So now I have the field, a label, URSIA Manager. Now, what goes in this section? What other fields do I want to add? I'm going to go up top and I'm going to start with a field of a data text type, 64 characters for the answer, because I want to know who actually took the application. That's what I want to know. So I'm going to put something for a field name like application taken by. Where do I want this to show? I want it to show on row number 2. So that means it's going to be right up under that label of URSIA Manager. Where do I want to show it as the item or the order? It's going to be the first thing on that second row. For the child applicant, I want it to be on the screen and printed. For the siblings, I'm not going to use it. For the adult applicants, I want it to show on the screen and printed. And for the non-applicants, I'm not going to use it. Giving you one more example, I'm going to close the data type 64 and I'm going to open up the yes no drop down. So I have a yes no question that my URSIA manager wants us to ask of the families. And I'm going to put something like transportation needed. Now, where do I want this? I want it to be on the same row as the application was taken by. So I'm going to put row 2. And then the item number, I want it to follow behind that field. So it's going to be item number 2 on the screen and printed, not used for siblings, on the screen and printed for my adult applicants, and then not used for my adult non-applicants. So I've added 3 fields to the family member module of Child Plus software. My next tab, well, I'll save first. My next tab is going to be personnel. Are there any fields that I need to add to the personnel module? Something that's not already in the system, something that I as an agency want to track for my staff members. I'm going to go down and I'm going to use the numeric field. I'll check because I want to use it. Now, what is the field name? I'm going to put CDL license number. I want that to show on row 1, and I want it to be item 1. After the CDL license number, I'm going to add in a data type, which is a date, and I want it to be CDL expiration. When is that license going to expire? And I want that to show on row 1, item number 2. And you have the same types of fields that we talked about for the family members, and you can simply click on the arrow and add to any of them. Now, my ladies and my gentlemen, with the family member fields that you're adding, as well as the personnel fields that you're adding, you have 220 that you can add or customize. So we're not expecting you to add and customize and use all of them in this first 30 days of you initially setting up your software, because you really need to figure out what Child Plus has to offer and what's needed. Then you can customize. But know that you do have 220 fields for the family member, as well as 220 for personnel. I'll go up top and save. I'll click on our third tab here, education. Now, this is where Child Plus is allowing us to add our educational screening tools to the software. And as we name those screening tools, then we can go ahead and name the areas that they screen. And then we'll be able to put in the scores that the child received in each of those areas. So I'm going to go ahead in my Assessment A header. I'm going to name my education screening tool, and I'm just going to say we use the ASQ3. Now I want to name the areas of the ASQ3, because as I've stated, it's going to show on the children's records, and I can put in the score that the children got in each area. So I'm just going to go ahead and put something like motor. I'll name communication, and I'll name cognitive. Now, unlike the family member and personnel modules, you only have 12 areas that you can name for your educational screening tool. Child Plus did give you a second tool if needed. If you use a different tool, maybe for a different program, you can put that here. I'll go up top and save. Our last tab is site inspections. In step 3, agency information, we added in your sites. For each site, you can track up to 50 inspection items. Here is where you name those inspection items. Child Plus starts you with a list. We have 10. You can keep the 10 and you can start adding on 11, or you can erase some that you know your agency doesn't use, and you can put something else here, like maybe instead of a licensing inspection item, maybe you want to put the safety kit or check as your first item. You have up to 50. I'll go up top and save, and we can close out of this step. Setup, initial setup, step 13, optional setup. Our next area is customize drop-down choices. This is where you can customize, add, edit, delete choices to the drop-down pick list throughout Child Plus software. So first, we have all of the fields within the software that are associated with a drop-down pick list. We have the name of the field. You'll see here an example, absent reason. And then in parentheses, we have where this field is located. The absent reason field is located or found in the individual attendance module. The choices that were pre-designed, predetermined by Child Plus are listed here. And to the far right of each one, it tells you that they're not editable. You cannot edit the choices that Child Plus added into the system. You have a choice of adding your own, so you can add absent reasons. Why are children absent in your neck of the woods? You have to put in a code. Now, your code can be 1 character, or it can be up to 3 characters. The description is what we'll see on the screen as well as reports. So I'll just put family vacation. That's a reason why children are absent. I'm going to click the green button, add a choice again, and this time I'm going to add a code, and the description is going to be doctor, dentist appointment. So children are absent because they have appointments. You would continue to click on the green button, add a choice, until you've put in all of the absent reasons. Now, my ladies and my gentlemen, you will never complete this list. And I say never complete because we may have brainstormed and thought of all the absent reasons that we could possibly think of. But a family may come with a different excuse or reason that we didn't think of. So you just simply come back here and add in that choice. So you probably will continuously be customizing your drop-down choices, okay? I'm going to go up top and save. There's an active checkbox. This is how you can say that this particular option or choice is inactive. You simply uncheck it. You'll say that I don't want to use this choice. Now, when you inactivate a choice, 2 things happen. First, the word inactive is now behind the description. And number 2, this choice will not be a choice when you're doing data entry from this point forward. Now, we may have used this previously, but as soon as you inactivate, data entry staff cannot use it from this point forward. I'm going to activate it back in. You'll also notice that for your codes, the one that you created, you can delete a choice. Maybe you don't want doctor dentist appointment anymore, so you can delete that choice. You get a confirmation. Are you sure? You answer yes. And now I can add in, maybe I wanted to add in not doctor and dentist, but I just wanted to simply call it a medical appointment. Let's take a look at another drop down choice that's familiar and everyone may need and want to customize. That's going to be language. So I find the field language. In parentheses, it's telling me that this language field is going to be found on the application for family members. It's going to be found in the personnel module for staff members, as well as I'll see language in the in-kind module for our volunteers. Child Plus by default comes with English and Spanish already in the system. So you can add any other languages that are spoken in your neck of the woods. Once you add the description for language, Child Plus is giving you a description that you can type in Spanish. This is solely for the online application. If your agency is going to use online applications in Child Plus, you can make your online applications be in Spanish. So the description, if it's here and it's in Spanish, when the parents or whomever sees it, your online application, they will see the Spanish description. We'll talk more about online applications at the bottom of step 13. I'll go up top and save, and I'll close. Setup, initial setup, step 13, optional setup, data entry defaults. This module was designed so that you could enter defaults of information that would apply to all applicants or the majority of the applicants. You would set it up, and so as the data entry person is entering the application, the information that you have set up here would default in the application. Now, if the information didn't apply, the data entry person would have to remove it and replace it with the correct information. Data entry defaults. Now, when we set up your software, we went ahead and put in your state because we figured any applications that you were receiving, the living address, the mailing address, the contact information, the doctor, dentist address, we figured that it probably would be coming from your state. Their addresses would be from your state. So we defaulted that in. It's up to you if you want to default more information. And you can just simply type it in if you want to default that. Remembering that it will automatically populate when adding an application, but you can always override by taking it out and putting in the correct information if it's not the default. We have a checkbox here. Default each family member's last name to the first family member's last name when adding new applications. In essence, this is saying, do you want the software to make every person you add in a family's last name that of the first last name you entered? You have the choice of a check is a yes and unchecking is no. I'll go ahead and uncheck for my training database because most of the families in my neck of the woods, the family members do not have the same last name. We can default general information about the family members, their ethnicity, as well as their language. You also have the option of defaulting some enrollment information. The software will come to you with a default of free full reimbursement for the CACFP status. You can change that here if you like. I'll go up top and save and close. Setup, initial setup, step 13, optional setup, family service events. Here we have a list of family services events or family services that you want to track on your families. This is a predefined list by Child Plus. You can delete if you don't want what we've put here, or you can inactivate as well if you don't want one of the choices that we have here. Most definitely, you want to look through the list and make sure that it's comprehensive for the services that you offer to your families. And if it is not, you can always add an event type. Child Plus has some of the most commonly used events, and I'll just point them out here. Emergencies, crises. That's something we track in family services on our families. Family goals, home visits, needs identified, as well as we can track the strengths that are identified in a family. So those are some of the main event types. If you need to add, we just simply click on Add Event Type. Now, one that I've noticed that several folks have added would be home-based home visits. So when you're adding, you just simply type in the name because you're adding. Child Plus made it active. Then you can decide which fields should be available for this event type. These are the data entry fields. These are the fields that we're capturing data for. So you can decide which ones you want to capture data in for the home-based home visit, and you can decide which ones you don't want to capture information in. And with that, you just simply uncheck, and that field will not be available on the data entry screen. Down below, you can associate the event type, in this case, home-based home visit. You can associate it with the family, or you can associate it with just the participant. Or you have two extra choices. You can associate it with the family by default, but change it to the participant if you want to while doing your data entry. Or you can default it to the participant, but change it to the family when you go do your data entry. Those are all agency's choices. When it comes to home-based home visit, and just as an example, in my training database, I'm going to put home-based home visits associated with the participants. So now when I go to do my data entry, if this is a home-based family, and maybe they have 2 children, I'm going to enter home-based home visits for each child, not just once for my visit to the family. Agencies call. The last update utility, because you are a brand new agency, you won't need that feature, but that's if you decide to change the association type in mid-year. Then you can update what you had previously entered to what you want it to be now. I'll go up top and save and close. Setup, initial setup, step 13, optional setup, family outcome instruments. Here is where Child Plus allows you to put in your family assessment, where you assess the families in the 7 PFCE areas. We gave you on the left of the screen 8 examples. You can use any of the examples, or you can add in your own assessment. In order to see the examples, I suggest that you click on the example, and in the top middle of the screen, there is a print button. You can print out all of the examples and let your Family and Community Partnership Manager review them to see if they're interested in using any of the 8. If you have your own assessment, on the bottom left, there's a button, Add a New Instrument. Now, when you're adding a new instrument, you can start with a blank. And that's what you want to do if you have your own assessment tool. If you want to use one of the 8 examples, you want to start with a copy of. And I'm going to start with a copy of example 7 for our purposes today. And I'll click on OK. Now, because I'm starting with a copy, I have to give the instrument a name. I tell the software how many times this year or the program year do I want to assess the families. I have 1 and up to 3. I'll keep the 3. I have to name my assessment periods. Preliminary, mid-year, end of the year, or you can do first, second, third. You can do pre, post, mid. Any naming that you want to give to know which period you are really assessing the families in. Next, we have a choice. When we go to print out the worksheets for the parents to fill out, do we want to show multiple assessments on the worksheet? Meaning, do I want to show all 3 of the assessments on one page, or do I only want to see one assessment at a time? So with this way, the single assessment, I would have to run the report or the worksheet 3 times and give to the family 3 times a year. Whereas with the multiple, I can run it once and just continuously hand them that sheet when it's time to fill it out. Agencies call. Notes. You can put in notes for your assessment. Now, by default, because we used an assessment already in Child Plus has given us the name of the agency that created the assessment. So for example 7, we can see that this was created by the Florida Head Start State Collaboration Office. And it was instrument was developed in 2015 for their school year of 15-16. Now that we've read that, we've acknowledged, they do allow you to erase that information. You do not have to keep that information on your tool. Something that you could put in the notes is if you want to add any essay or open-ended questions for the families to fill out. You can add those in the notes as well. Let's scroll down to the next section, and this is going to be the scoring setup. You tell the software, and because I erased the notes, I get this message or this warning that some of the notes were deleted, and I'm okay with that. You tell the software when it comes to scoring, do you want a higher score to mean a greater need or a lower score to mean a greater need? It's agency's call, and it depends on your assessment. So I'm going to go with a lower score means a greater need. Now look at my scoring. If you score a 1, that means you're in crisis. That's the greatest need. If you're scoring a 3, you're stable. And if you're scoring a 5, that means you're thriving, you're fine in that area. Up under this window, we have 3 buttons to the right. You can add more choices to this scoring setup. You can edit. Maybe you don't want to use the word thriving. Maybe you want, your agency doesn't call it thriving at a 5 level. It's just mean that they're at the top and no needed info at this time. So you can change the descriptions and the scorings, or you can delete if you want as well. Our next section is going to be the category setup. So looking at your document or your assessment, what are the general categories? And that's what you want to add here. Now, we made a copy of example 7. I like example 7 because it uses as general categories the 7 categories from the PFCE on the Office of Head Start's website. So you'll see family well-being, it goes on with positive parent-child relationships, and it goes all the way down to families as advocates and leaders. You can, with the buttons up under this window, you can add new outcome categories, or you can edit the ones that's already listed here, as well as you can move them around by moving them up, down, and reordering them on the screen. Lastly, we can delete if we don't want one of the categories listed here. As I've stated, the family outcome categories here are general categories. Below Child Plus gives you the family outcome items. Now, these are the things that you are going to ask or score the parents on. So, if we're looking at the general category of family well-being, you'll notice that there's an item here of housing. So, I'm essentially going to ask my families, how would you rate yourself when it comes to family well-being of housing? You'll notice that I did give my family some type of scoring guidance. I want them to score themselves as a 1 if they're homeless or on the verge of becoming homeless. I want them to score themselves with a 3 if they have semi-permanent housing, and I have a description of that. And they can score themselves as a 5 if they're able to own or live in their long-term affordable housing. I would then have another item where I would ask my families to score or rate themselves in the areas of family well-being when it comes to safety. And I have guidance for that as well. Up under the window, we have buttons where we can add additional items or additional areas. We can edit some of the ones already present here. And because we made a copy of example 7, you may find that you need to edit what was here because maybe some of the choices are not applicable to your neck of the woods. We can move the items around, we can move them up or down, as well as we can delete any items that are not appropriate for our neck of the woods. That's how we add in our family outcomes instrument, the tool that we use to assess our families according to the Office of Head Start's PFCE framework. I'll go up top and I'll save and I'll close. Setup, initial setup, step 13, optional setup, region information. Now, we mentioned region information in step 3 when we were setting up our sites. That's where you would attach the region. And we also mentioned region information in step 10 when we were setting up our security settings. Here is where we actually add in the regions if we need to group our sites. This is not where you would place your region in the Head Start area. No, this is if you want to group your sites you can add regions. So I'm going to go with something like a cluster. Maybe in my neck of the woods, we have a cluster 1, and I'm just going to add a cluster 2. So now if I wanted to, I can group my sites into cluster 1, and I can run reports by that, or I can group my sites and place them in cluster 2, and I can run reports that way as well. The majority of agencies will not need regions. You will not need to group your sites. I'm going to go up top and save. My ladies and my gentlemen, I am going to refer back to step 3 so you can see where this region information went to our sites. So I'm going to click back up top on Initial Setup, Step 3, Add Agency Information. I'll select my agency's name. I'll go to the tab Sites. I'll find one of my sites like the Faith House Center. And below there's a field region. And now you see I can put my Faith House Center in cluster 1. And I'll do the same with Happy Hearts. I'll put that in cluster 1. So now I can run reports on cluster 1 and see both information from Faith House Center and Happy Heart Center. As well as I could set security and just give folks access to cluster 1. I'll save and I'll close. Setup, Initial Setup, Step 13, Optional Setup, System Preferences. Here we have some preferences that we have to set up that will be global and apply to all users using our Child Plus system. So our first tab is the General tab, and there's a General section. Do you want to put in a minimum length of characters for folks to search for families? When you're typing in a name to search, do you want your folks to type in a minimum number of characters? By default, this is 0. Child Plus has a poverty calculator in the software. And if you set up the Department of Health and Human Services poverty guidelines here, you can use the calculator to see if a family is eligible or not. This is only for the calculator. We set up the poverty guidelines for the children that are applying in step 4. Do you want to show the forums or social media in Child Plus? Do you want your staff to be able to access the forums, which Child Plus has a feature request form, as well as we have a Head Start form? Or do you want your staff to be able to access social media? That's going to be Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Do you want these to be available through Child Plus? Now, your folks would access it on the top right under Community. Next, we have attachments. When you are scanning files into your computer and then attaching them to Child Plus, what do you want us to do with the file after it's been attached? Do you want us to leave it in the folder we found it? Do you want us to make a folder called Attached and place it there? Or do you want us to delete the file from your machine? By default, the answer is move to a created subfolder named Attached. Does your agency operate an American Indian Alaska Native program? You want to answer yes if you do, because Child Plus has additional controls built into the system for those agencies. Do you want to duplicate Social Security numbers? So you have the choice of allowing multiple people to use the same Social Security number, or do not allow one Social Security number to be used by multiple people. The default is the second choice. On the bottom, we have a default value for PIR yes and no questions. What this means is when you're going to do data entry, for the PIR questions that are yes and no type questions, do you want us to default all of the answers to blank and you will have to enter the yeses and the nos? Or do you want us to default all of those questions to no, and then you would just have to touch the ones that are yes? This is an agency's call, but keep in mind, if you're doing data entry, are you paying attention? Because when no is there, some people may think no is already the answer, and they may not ask the parents or answer the question. If it's blank, they know they have to put something there. So think of your data entry folks and your agency and make a wise decision here. Do we want to show red PIR links above the fields that impact the PIR? If you are a Head Start, Early Head Start program, I highly suggest keeping that checked. If you are a pre-K, daycare, or state-only program that does not have to turn in the federal program information report, you by all means can uncheck that checkbox, because you do not need that extra notification that this is PIR information. I'll go up top and save. The next tab is enrollment. We have a couple of system preferences in enrollment. The first section is applications. When adding a new application, what's the first name that you put in? Because that's how we're going to default Child Plus. Is the first name the child, the applicant, or is the first name the primary adult? Or do your apps differ so that you don't want the system to default either one of those? If you're using the Child Plus application, the child is the first name we enter. When adding a new family, should other adults being anyone outside of the primary and secondary, anyone outside of mom and dad, should those other adults be included in the number in family? This is simply by default, should they be included. You can always override. When adding a family, should family members that do not live with the family be included in the number in family? Once again, remember, this is by default. You can always override on the individual records. Do you serve adult participants? As an example, expectant mothers. If you are an early Head Start program and you do serve pregnant moms, we want to make sure that this is yes and turned on. If you communicated that you were an early Head Start program to your salesperson, by default, when you get your new Child Plus Live database, this will be turned on. For the race field, do you want to track the specific races for multiracial individuals? Do you want to know if a parent has specified that their child is multiracial? Do you want to know all of the races that make up that one individual child? That would be a yes if you want to track that. Do you want to track descriptions when other is selected as a race? Do you want the parent to specify or explain what other is? When it comes to enrollment, when enrolling a participant, should the enrollment date be used as the default entry date? Since the performance standards changed in November of 2016, entry date is no longer referenced. So I would highly suggest that you make this answer a yes, because enrollment date and entry date are essentially the same. Would you like for Child Plus to restrict a classroom's enrollment by the funded slots? We set up the funding slots for each classroom back in step 4. So would you like the software to let you know if you are trying to enroll over that number of slots? And lastly, we have, would you want to show the CACFP status on the poverty calculator? This is only for the poverty calculator. It has no direct relationship with data entry of meal counts. It's only for the calculator. I'll save. Our next tab is the data history log. Do you want Child Plus to keep changes made to all of the children's records? By default, this is turned on. You tell us how long do you want to keep those records or those changes. By default, the system only has 120 days. I suggest changing that to the max number of days, the 365. That way you'll always have a year's worth of changes that you can reference. Then we have the modules that you want to track those changes that are made in the records. So you can uncheck any modules that you know you don't want to keep changes from. I'll go and save. Our next tab is attendance. Our first section is Entry Express. When data entering attendance and a classroom is set to open, how do you want us to default the attendance for participants who normally participate? Do you want the software to mark the children as present, and therefore your teachers or whomever's doing data entry would just have to touch the children that are absent? Or do you want us to default all the children to a blank, and your teachers or your data entry person, they will have to touch every child and put whether they're present or absent? I'm going to go with the present because it speeds up the data entry. Participants who normally do not participate. This was designed for those children that may be duly enrolled, the ones that you may share with another program. The child's IEP may have said that he has 3 days with Head Start and your program, and then 2 days of the week the child should go over to the speech therapist for a whole day, or maybe the School of the Blind for a whole day, but somewhere else that child is duly enrolled. So what do you want to do in Child Plus for the 2 days that that child is not going to be with you? Do you want us to mark them as not scheduled because they are essentially not scheduled to be with you? Or do you want us to default them to excused absent? Or do you want to default them to blank? It's your choice of how you want to handle them. How do you want the software to handle children or participants that have an entry date that is prior to their enrollment date? Well, we should not have this scenario. And I said that backwards, excuse me. Participants whose entry date is not the same as their enrollment date. We should not have this since the performance standards changed in 2016. Enrollment and entry date are essentially the same. So I recommend leaving it blank, so if it does happen, a blank would draw your attention to that child's attendance. But you can put a code there if you like. Do you want to default the classroom status to open? Do you want the software to automatically open the days of the week that you said this classroom operates? We said the days that the classroom operates back in step 4. I'm going to keep that checked. Do we want to default the scheduled meals when participant is marked as present? When a child is marked as present, do you want the software to automatically go ahead and check the meals that are served in that classroom? If you are doing your data entry at the end of the day, by all means, keep this checked because it's going to speed up your data entry. Point of service meal count was taken on paper. You're just data entering at the end of the day. Now, if you're planning on data entering the information in Child Plus at those meal times, then you want to uncheck that box. Our next section is the attendance scanning. This is if you're going to buy the barcode scanners and use the scanning feature of Child Plus to enter attendance and meal counts. If you're going to use this feature, if a child is not checked in, how do you want Child Plus to default their attendance? Do you want us to make them absent, excused, or unexcused? Or you can choose blank as well. I'm going to go with the unexcused because if they were not checked in, then what's the reasoning? And we can investigate all of the unexcused. When participants are checked in, mark all of their scheduled meals as served. Now, if you're using the scanning feature, the beauty of the scanning feature is that you can scan at point of service. So I'm going to keep that unchecked because we're going to use the barcode scanner when the meals are served. Mark a participant tardy if they check in so many minutes or more after the classroom begins. Well, we set up the begin times back in step 4 for each classroom. So if they scan in so many minutes after that begin time, do you want us to mark them as tardy? I'm going to go with a yes, but I'm going to increase that time to 30 minutes. You're not tardy until 30 minutes after my begin time. If you're scanning, and do you want the software to mark a participant as left early if they checked out so many minutes before the classroom end time? I'm going to check that, but I'm going to change the time frame to 30 as well. This section was for the attendance scanning feature. I'll scroll down to the next section, and this is going to be staff time clock. Have you at your agency decided if you're going to use Child Plus software as your staff's check in and check out, like a staff attendance? If you are, then we want to turn it on. We want to enable that feature. Once you enable this feature, how do you want to use it? Do you want the employees to check in and check out, or do you want them to just enter the number of hours that they worked on a particular day? You can lock the time clocks prior to a certain day if you want to. And when we lock just simply means that you can't go back and change the information if it's prior to the date here. I'll scroll down to the next section, and this is going to be the mobile app feature. The mobile app feature is when you're taking attendance and meal counts on an app, be it on your tablet device or be it on your iPad. Now, you will have to install it on those different devices, but here is where you actually turn on that you want to use the mobile attendance and meal count app. You then turn on if you want the parent feature to be used. If you don't want it, you just simply uncheck. Now, the parent check-in feature allows the parents to check in on your mobile device, and it allows them to also put their signature in. That's another checkpoint here. Do you want to record the parent's signature, or can they just check in, check out? This will record the signature of whomever dropped the child off or picked them up. Do you want to mark the participants as tardy if they check in after the class began? And I'm going to go with that 30. Do you want to mark the participants as left early if they leave so many minutes before the classroom ends? The next checkbox, only allow meals to be recorded for a participant that is checked in at the time the meal is recorded. Definitely, I want that checked because we wouldn't want to have someone mark little Johnny as eating breakfast and he didn't come in until 12 noon. So only show the meals for the times that the children were there. When the participants are checked in, do you want to mark all of their scheduled meals? Well, you could, but the beauty of having meal counts on a mobile device, on our tablet or our iPad, is that we can walk around and actually capture that information at point of service. So I'm not going to check that. Require meals to be counted at point of service. We do want that checked with the scenario I just gave. Do not allow meals to be recorded more than so many minutes before the meal time. If we're recording at point of service, I'm just going to give a little wiggle room here insofar as 3 minutes prior they can begin to capture meal counts, or more than so many minutes after the meal ends. I am just giving data entry time because if you're capturing at point of service, it should be exact to the point. It should be exact on the time. So I gave the little wiggle rooms of 3 minutes and 3 minutes prior and 5 minutes after, just in case we're just doing that data entry right there. Our next section here is going to be ADA. Child Plus is going to calculate your average daily attendance and the percentages. We are simply telling you how the codes would affect those calculations. A present is a good thing and it counts positive towards your percentages. We're showing you that an absent is an absent and it's not considered a positive number towards your percentiles. And then you'll see something like the not scheduled code. It doesn't affect, and we're not using it in the calculations at all. You have a checkbox where you can allow users to override the settings that you've made here when they're running the 3 reports listed here. I'm not going to check that because I want all staff to follow how we set up the codes. Our last section, as I scroll down to the bottom, is going to be locking feature. Do we want to lock our attendance records so no one can change them? I'll turn that on, and I have the option of locking by a certain day of the week. I can lock by a certain day of the month. I can lock by after so many days old, or I can lock by a specific date. I'm going to go with the day of the month, and I'm going to put the 7th of every month. I want a Child Plus software to lock attendance for the prior or previous month by the 7th of the upcoming month. I'll save. Our next tab is a migrant tab. If your agency is a migrant program, you want to definitely turn on the features that we have to help you track migrant information, like the agricultural income, agricultural activities. You can track the eligibility codes that you have that are a little different than regular Head Start, Early Head Start programs. The initial status for the children we can track. Definitely, we want to record any previous addresses. And then we have a special report, Report 2280, that is a migrant and seasonal enrollment report. So you want to track that, check that you want to track using that report, and only count participants who were enrolled on the last day that services were provided for the reporting month. Or you can say count participants who were enrolled for at least one day during the reporting month. That's your call, and it's affecting Report 2280. I'll go up top and save. Our next tab is in-kind. For in-kind, we have the option to lock in-kind transactions so that they cannot be changed. We can lock by a certain day of the month for the previous month. We can lock by so many days old, or we can lock by a specific date. And I'm going to do the lock on this day of the month, and I'm going to keep that on 10. Our next tab, notes. Throughout Child Plus software, we have notes fields. It's where you can type like it's a white sheet of paper. Just type till your little heart is content. Well, with that typing, we have a clock icon. If you click the clock icon, we will put today's date or the date that you're data entering, the time when you're data entering, as well as the user's name, first and last name. You have the option to change this. Maybe you don't want their first and last name. Maybe you only want to show their initials. Or maybe you want to use their login name. This is all agency's call. You can also include their title and or position. Also, with the notes field on the bottom of the screen, you can create shorthand notes. If there is something that you know you type often on several children's records, you can make an acronym so that you don't have to type the phrase all the time. The example here on the screen is NHV. If you type NHV, the computer will type, "My next home visit is scheduled for." I'm going to show you how you do that. When I type NHV, I want the software to put, "My next home visit is scheduled for." I'll show you another example. When I type LVM, I want the software to type, "Left voice message for the parent to return a call to the center." So instead of using all of the keystrokes to type the phrases, all I have to type are the acronyms and the phrase will automatically populate. A data entry helper. The next tab is fees. If your agency is like a child care agency or a daycare agency, you may collect fees from the parents. This is where you turn on that you want to use the fee tracking module of Child Plus. Now, once you turn it on, the instructions here on the screen tell you that you have to go back to step 4, program information, and there's more setup to the fee tracking system. Our next tab is email. You tell the software, and by default it is turned on, that you want to send emails from the to-do list. Now, in sending emails through the to-do list, those emails could have the children's names in them. Do you want that? Or do you want For confidentiality, privacy issues, do you want to just have the child's first name and last initial, the first initial and the last name, or do you not want to show a name at all? This is agency's call. Now, depending on the choice you make, you then have, do you want to show the individual's Child Plus ID? Every person that is placed into Child Plus software is giving a Child Plus ID. It's a unique computer generated number for that individual. So, do you want to show that in the email? I suggest keeping it turned on, because even if you use something like first name and last initial, you may have a Mary Jones, a Mary Johnson, and a Mary Jackson, but the Child Plus ID is unique to each individual. So you will know exactly which Mary you're referencing, as well as you can search for the correct Mary by typing in their Child Plus ID. So I highly suggest keeping that turned on. I'll save. And our last tab here is going to be dashboards. Now, dashboards is a feature in Child Plus where we gather your data and we show you the data in a graph or chart as well as a grid format. Well, in the grid format, you can have Child Plus to display the wording in red if there are issues or if your information is not meeting the thresholds you have set here. Child Plus went ahead and we set thresholds for you. We set them according to performance standards if there was a direct number, or communication with our trainers as well as agencies. You want to make sure you agree with the thresholds. Example being attendance. Thresholds highlight any values that are below 85%. I think we would agree with that. When it comes to disabilities, highlight values that are below 10%. When it comes to enrollment, highlight values that are below 100% of enrollment. Now, when we get to something like the wait list, I don't recall a specific number being in the performance standards or any of our rule books. So we here at Child Plus decided that 20% was a great benchmark. But as your agency, maybe you guys say we only keep a wait list of 10%. So anything that's below 10% on the wait list, if the numbers are below that, highlight it, bring it to our attention. These are your agency's thresholds. You want to change them. Now, for new agencies, I'm not thinking that you're going to be using the to-do list or the dashboard until you've been using Child Plus for about 3 months at least, because you have to get data into the system in order for those monitoring tools to work. I'll go ahead and save, and we can close. Setup. Initial setup, step 13, optional setup, zip code configuration. This feature allows you to set up zip codes in your neck of the woods, as well as the city, state, and county associated with that zip code. Then the feature will help with data entry. When you're data entering addresses within the software and you just type in the zip code, the city, state, and county will automatically populate because it's been set up here. I'll go ahead and put in a couple of, I'll click here to add a new row, and I'll put in a zip code along with the city, the state, and the county. Now, your county code is only up to 3 characters. I'll press enter and I'll enter another zip code with this city, state, and county. And lastly, I'll put in another. I also wanted to show you how If there's a zip code, one zip code that applies to multiple cities, you can put that in as well. Remembering we said that these were data entry helpers. So now when someone is data entering an address, like from the application, when they put in 30017, the software is going to automatically put Atlanta, Georgia, Fulton County. Now, if they're data entering an address and they put in 30328, the software is going to give them the choice of selecting, is it Atlanta or Sandy Springs? But it speeds up the data entry of addresses, and you have addresses throughout the software for the applicants, you have for their emergency contacts, you have addresses on your community resources, you have addresses for staff. So this will work, this feature will work in all of the places we have addresses. I'll go up top and save, and I'll close. Setup, initial setup, step 13, optional setup, online application. The online application allows you to put the URL on your website, or you can email it to someone and they fill out the application. And once they submit, the information is automatically inputted into your Child Plus system. So first we have to, on the General tab, turn on the feature to say we want to use the feature. So the online application is enabled. Here's your URL. As I stated, you can put it on your website, or you can copy it and email it to someone. You can add in your agency's logo so it'll show on your online application. You even get to decide the colors you want for your online application. I'll scroll down a little. Here we put in instructions that we want our parents to see as they're beginning to fill out the online application. You can put general instructions here, as well as you have some final instructions and a thank you message that you can place on the screen. On the bottom, you have the option of having your online app in the Spanish version as well. Now, if you enable the Spanish version, now you're going to put your introductory and final instructions in Spanish. This is what the parents will see. The next tab is going to be program terms and location. So now you have the option of turning on your online application just for certain program terms. You don't have to use it for the total program. You don't have to use it for this school year. You can use it for the next school year or program term. It's all your option to allow families to apply online for this particular program. You decide when you want the online app to be available. If you just want to do it for a month, if you guys just want to have it open in the springtime, because after spring, when it comes to summer and a mom is applying, they need to come into the office. This is all agencies call. Your program term, we want to have parent-friendly information, because some parents may not know Head Start, Early Head Start, child care. We may need to specify this is a program that serves children ages 3 to 5 or something like that. Our next section is location preferences. Do you want to allow families to specify what location they're applying to? You could turn that off if you like. By default, it's turned on. Site name. Do you want to allow families to select this site in the list of location preferences? Meaning, do I want the families to see Faith House Center or Happy Heart Center? Well, if it's for my Head Start program and I know I don't offer Head Start at the Happy Heart Center, I don't want that to be a choice for that program option. If I do offer those services at that site name and I want to allow families to use that as a location preferences, I can then specify program options at that particular site. You can also send notifications to certain emails when an online application is submitted with the selected site. So I could have the Child Plus software send a notification to the site manager at Faith House Center when someone applies. Our next tab is the primary adult information. You first have instructions that you can enter for the primary adult to read and understand whom you're really looking to fill out this primary adult information. And then we have the fields, and I'll scroll down. We have the fields that we want the parent or the primary adult to fill out about themselves, the primary adult. Now you'll notice some fields are mandatory. They are grayed out. Those are definite. Name, birth date, and email address is a requirement. All other fields are optional based on your agency. We then have the address tab with instructions and the fields that are required as well as optional. The secondary adult, you have the option to include a secondary adult. Maybe you don't want additional adults on the online app. You'll gather that information once parents come into the office. This is all your call to check or not check. But you have instructions for secondary adults, and then we have fields that are mandatory required as well as optional fields. For any other adults, you have the option of allowing them to include other adults. Maybe you don't want the other adults, or you don't want them until they come into the office. So you could turn this section off or on. Instructions and the fields. For family, including the family information, you have the option. You have instructions and the fields. Child applicant. No choice of that because they wouldn't be filling out the application if they weren't applying someone. So we just have instructions, mandatory fields, and optional fields. Our next tab, siblings. Do you want to include siblings on your online application? Instructions, mandatory field, and optional fields. Our last tab here, it's going to be, do you want to send a confirmation email to the primary adult after they submit the application? I'm going to check there. You can put a subject, which would be something like confirmation of submitted Head Start, early Head Start application. You have the body. Thank you for applying. Someone will contact you soon. Or you may give specific information. Someone will contact you within a week, or you may say someone will contact you and that person is, and give your URSEA manager's name and telephone number. This is all your call as to what's in the confirmation email that you're sending to the parents. When an online application is submitted, send a notification to the following email addresses. So you can have notifications sent to someone at your agency that an online application has been submitted and is now in your Child Plus system, namely the URSEA manager or maybe family service workers. Another choice, when an online application that does not have a preferred site is submitted, send a notification to the following email address. Now, on a previous tab, we said if the parents applied to a center, we would send that to the center managers. Here, we're saying if the parents didn't select the site, who would get the email of those online applications? Once you've completed here, we can save and close.